The day she smiled at me across that courtroom was the day I knew she had already lost. But let me take you back. Back to before I knew what betrayal truly felt like. Back to when I still believed that the people who loved you would never be the ones to destroy you. My name is Elena, and for most of my adult life, I did everything right. I worked hard, I stayed quiet, I gave my whole heart to the people I called family. I was the kind of woman who showed up for birthdays, for emergencies, for the 2 a.m. phone calls when no one else would answer. I had spent 12 years building a business with my bare hands, a small but beautiful interior design studio. It wasn't just a company, it was my dream. Every late night, every skipped vacation, every moment of doubt that I pushed through, it was all woven into those walls, and it was thriving. Then I made one mistake. I trusted the wrong person with everything. Her name was Diana, my business partner, my best friend of 17 years, the woman who had stood as a bridesmaid at my wedding, who had held my hand in the hospital when I lost my mother, who had told me, more times than I can count, that I was the sister she never had. She was charming, she was brilliant, and she knew exactly how to make you feel like the most special person in the room. That was her gift. I used to admire it. I didn't know yet that the same gift she used to love people, she also used to manipulate them. It started with small things I dismissed because how do you suspect someone you love? A missing invoice here, a client meeting I was never told about, a decision made without my input. I'd bring it up gently and she'd laugh it off, always with an explanation so reasonable that I'd end up apologizing for even asking. Elena, you're overthinking again. You always do this. You know I handle everything. Just trust me, okay? And I did. I trusted her because that's what you do when someone has been your person for nearly 2 decades. But what I didn't know that day was that while I was trusting her, she was slowly, carefully, and deliberately transferring our company's assets into an account that only had her name on it. She had been doing it for almost a year, and she had been planning it for much longer than that. The morning it all unraveled began like any other Tuesday. I came into the office early, coffee in hand, a list of ideas buzzing in my head for a new client project. I sat down at my desk, opened our shared finance portal, and froze. The numbers didn't make sense. I blinked, refreshed the page, stared again. Over $400,000. Gone. Not missing, not misfiled. Gone. Transferred. Clean and deliberate, like someone who had been practicing the move for months. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost knocked my coffee onto the floor. I picked up the phone to call Diana. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. I called again, and then I drove to her house, the house I had helped her decorate, the house where we had laughed and cried and planned our futures together, and I knocked on her door. Nothing. That's when I realized she wasn't just gone from the phone, she was gone from my life, on purpose, with everything she had taken from me packed neatly into her future, and nothing left for mine. The days that followed were the darkest of my life, and I have known dark days. I have buried people I loved. I have failed and started over. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize that someone you trusted with your soul was a stranger all along. I hired a financial attorney within 48 hours. She sat across from me, reviewed the documents, and looked up with an expression I will never forget. It was the look of someone who had seen this before, but was still angry on my behalf. She didn't just steal from your account, Elena. She forged your signature on 3 separate fund transfers. That's not just civil fraud, that's criminal. Criminal. The word landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of it kept spreading outward. And that was only the beginning of what we found. Diana had been grooming our biggest clients behind my back. She had been sending them private emails, posing as the sole creative director of our studio, planting seeds of doubt about me. Little things, whispers, that I was difficult, that I was unreliable, that the real talent behind the company had always been her. She was preparing to launch her own competing firm, using our clients, our vendor contacts, our years of reputation, and most of our capital. She had been building her exit for 18 months, while sitting across from me every single day, while sharing lunch with me, while calling me her best friend. There were nights I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling and go over every memory, searching for the moments I must have missed, the signs I must have ignored, and I'd find them eventually. A glance that lingered too long on a document, a conversation she changed the subject of too quickly, a laugh that now felt hollow when I replayed it in the dark. The grief of losing a friend is one thing, but losing a friend who chose to destroy you? That's something your heart doesn't have words for. It sits in your chest like glass, sharp, jagged, and impossible to remove without bleeding. My lawyers filed the lawsuit. Diana's lawyers fired back immediately. And that's when I saw who she truly was underneath all that warmth and charm. She was vicious, cold, strategic. Her legal team claimed I had mismanaged the finances myself, that the transfers were authorized, that I had agreed to dissolve the partnership, and simply couldn't accept it now that it hadn't worked in my favor. She was calling me the villain of my own story. She's a jealous woman who can't handle her partner moving on, her attorney said in a press statement. Our client is simply protecting assets that are rightfully hers. Rightfully hers. I remember reading those words and feeling something shift inside me. The grief began to harden into something else, something quieter and more focused, determination. I stopped crying. I started building, a case so airtight, so layered with evidence that there would be no shadow left for Diana to hide in. My team uncovered everything. The forged signatures, verified by a forensic handwriting expert, the private client emails recovered from a server backup she didn't know existed, financial records showing every unauthorized transfer, time-stamped and traceable, testimonies from 2 former employees she had manipulated into silence with promises of jobs at her new firm, employees who, when faced with the truth, chose to do the right thing. We built the case piece by piece, like restoring a broken mosaic, and with every piece we placed, the picture became clearer. The trial date was set for March. I marked it on my calendar in red, not with dread, with patience, because that's what real strength looks like. Not the explosion of rage, but the quiet discipline of a woman who knows exactly what she's walking toward. Diana didn't know what was waiting for her inside that courtroom, but I did. The morning of the trial, I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone, not to perform. I put on the navy blazer I had worn the day I signed my very first client contract, 12 years ago, in a tiny borrowed office, terrified and full of hope. I wore it as a reminder of who I was before Diana tried to erase me. She arrived in the courtroom looking polished and composed. Her lawyers flanked her like armor. She didn't look at me when she entered, which told me everything. Guilty people rarely can. But then, and I will never forget this, she turned and she smiled at me. It was the same smile I had seen 1,000 times. Warm, confident, the smile that once made me feel safe. This time, it made me feel nothing, because I finally understood it for what it was, a mask, and I had already seen what lived underneath it. The trial moved through its phases. Her lawyers were sharp. They challenged every document, questioned every witness, worked hard to paint me as emotionally unstable, a woman scorned, not a victim of fraud. They were good at what they did, but my team was better. The moment everything changed was when the forensic accountant took the stand. He was a quiet man with an unshakable voice, and he laid out, with absolute precision, a paper trail that stretched back 22 months. Every transfer, every forged document, every timestamp. He showed the judge a digital reconstruction of the fund movements. Clean, visual, undeniable. Diana's attorney tried to cross-examine him, tried to find a crack. There wasn't one. Then the former employee testimonies came in. 2 women who had worked with us for years, who had been promised positions at Diana's new firm in exchange for their silence, who had ultimately decided that their integrity was worth more than her promises. She told us Elena knew about the transfers, one of them said quietly from the stand. She said it was all planned, but we saw the look on Elena's face the day she found out. That wasn't a woman who knew. That was a woman who was shattered. The courtroom went still, and Diana, for the first time since this nightmare began, finally looked afraid. The judge deliberated for less than a day. When we returned to the courtroom for the ruling, the air felt different, heavy, charged. Diana sat with her back straight, her expression composed. She was still performing, right up until the very last moment. The judge looked down at her papers, then looked up, and she spoke those words. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The defendant is ordered to repay the full sum of $463,000 plus legal costs and damages. Furthermore, this case is being referred to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution on charges of fraud and forgery. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I sat very still and let the words wash over me like warm water. I looked at Diana. She was staring at the table. That composed, polished exterior, gone. She looked like what she was, a person who had built her future on someone else's foundation and had just watched it collapse. Her new firm never opened. The clients she had tried to steal came back. Most of them reached out to me directly once the truth became public. My studio didn't just survive, it grew. I think about Diana sometimes. Not with hatred. I moved past that somewhere between the sleepless nights and the courtroom. I think about her with something more like sadness, because she had every gift she needed to build something extraordinary, honestly, and she chose this instead. She chose to take from the one person who would have given her anything freely if she had only asked. If there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this. Your greatest threat is rarely a stranger. It is the person sitting closest to you, the one who knows your vulnerabilities, your schedule, your passwords, your dreams. The ones we love are the ones we forget to protect ourselves from. But here is what I also know. Betrayal does not get to be the last word. Not when you refuse to let it be. I rebuilt, stronger than before. And the foundation this time, it was built on something Diana never had. My own 2 hands and the truth. She thought she'd won, right up until the judge spoke those words. And in that moment, so did I.